Hello, and welcome to Autology, the podcast that brings you the latest on automotive technology. This week, we're bringing you daily recaps of the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, and you're here with me, Brian Rhodes, Jeremy Carlson, Associate Director, and Colin Martinez, Principal Consultant at S&P Global Mobility. Hello to you both, and thanks for joining this week's episode of Autology.
Hello, hello. Happy to be here. It's good to be back at CES.
Yeah. Thanks for having us, Brian. It's great to be back at CES.
Yeah, it is good to be back. It feels a little strange, doesn't it? But it's been busy already. So, as I mentioned, we're going to be bringing you guys daily recaps the next 3 days, and then also next week we'll kind of have more of a all-encompassing recap of some of the themes of the show. But certainly a lot of information to parse through already on our first sort of full day here. So, why don't we start off with an easy one? Maybe Colin, if you want to kick us off. What are your instant takeaways? What are the things that pop in your mind first for what you saw or what you heard today?
Yeah, no, it was it's a great start to the show. And you notice that the automakers, as they usually try to win first, right? So the big takeaways for me were from Volkswagen and Volvo. And, we'll discuss later what Qantas and BMW are unveiling. One of the big ones here that people hadn't seen before is the almost production Wagon ID.7. This is a sedan, and it was based off the ID Aero that we saw a few years ago. The ID nameplate, that's the new nomenclature for Volkswagen going forward for their electric vehicles. The ID.7, that would sound like it was a seven-seater crossover, but in fact, actually, it is this Passat-sized sedan. What has been said is that this is probably going to be the longest range Volkswagen thus far, Volkswagen branded vehicle, about 435 miles in the European harmonized system. And people are sort of saying around the 350-mile range for the US measurement system. In general, I thought it was interesting that they released that here because sedans are, frankly, becoming a very unpopular vehicle. They did also mention that it will be exported from Germany and not built here, unlike what they're doing with the ID.4 and the ID.5. So, Jeremy and Ryan, I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add about Volkswagen.
Yeah, I
So
mean
then,
we yeah, I mean we know that Volkswagen is making a big push on software here. So I think I'll be looking to see with the ID.7, how in particular is the development of the automated driving software, coming along. What kind of a form does it take here as it comes to market in that kind of final consumer form? We know that there's going to be, OTA updates to these things, but obviously you need to have a final package ready to ship to customers. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that looks here on Rhodes here when we get our hands on it.
yeah, and that's a great point, actually, speaking to the software. So, as we all know, and Volkswagen has stated itself, they have had issues that have delayed certain vehicle lines, like the Artemis line of vehicles. So, it's good to see that the ID.7 is still more or less on track. One interesting thing is the infotainment system, a similar screen that you've seen in other ID systems, is this 15-inch infotainment screen. They did make the point to mention that they're getting rid of physical HVAC controls. I think they were haptics in the ID.4 to begin with a far more emphasis on VPA and mood modes and things of that nature. So, taking another step there from what you see in Teslas.
And you know what? Speaking of vehicles here, I think the other highlight for me, it was a busy day. There was a lot of interesting stuff happening, in particular with a lot of the supplier press conferences. But the cake here at the very end of the day was with Sony. We went over to the convention center for the final event of the afternoon, and Sony, after talking a good bit about all of their property, they're adapting a lot of video game IP into movies. They're doing some really cool things with the Gran Turismo franchise and some pretty high quality IMAX level cameras. But ultimately, about 2/3 through the conference, they finally got to the unveiling of their vehicle, I should say, the next iteration of the vehicle and the brand, Afeela, Afeela. It's got feel right in the middle of it. It's all based off of, the philosophy in particular from Sony and the company overall. I believe they call it Kondo It's being excited, it's being passionate about something and trying to bring all of those together into this final product. They feel really good about what they're doing with this vehicle and this combination of, satisfaction and excitement for what they're putting out here to customers. So that Sony Honda Motors combination here and the Afeela brand rolled out on stage. We got to see, a little bit about their philosophy, a little bit about the design. There were a lot of people there, so we couldn't get up close to the vehicle here quite yet. But they did talk about the driving forces here, the three A's that help define what this vehicle is all about. Autonomy, not, of course, a surprise to anyone. We know that there's a huge amount of sensors around this vehicle. They talked about 45 cameras, talked about 800 tops in terms of compute power, but they added augmentation and affinity onto this kind of philosophy here for the Afeela vehicle. Augmentation really talked about the user experience, not just in terms of kind of the UI and how you interact with the vehicle, but also how they can augment it, with their IP, with property, with, gaming being a kind of a part of that combination. And then affinity was really kind of this idea of harmonizing with the environment, not just kind of the physical environment, but in the ecosystem where this vehicle is meant to run. So they've done a great job, I think, in terms of bringing all of that together. They've got a very clear vision. They've got a brand out there now. They brought Qualcomm up on stage as well to kind of contribute the Snapdragon platform and really underpinning everything they're doing there with the digital chassis. So it looked great, and they had a great event. There was a lot of really positive reaction to it.
Yeah, I feel like Sony has really become a centerpiece of this show. It was a few years ago, we had essentially a concept buck of all of the different technology that they could offer into automotive, and that has evolved over a relatively short period of time, very in front of our eyes, very, very out for everybody to see into a strategy of developing a vehicle and building partnerships along the way. So I think it's particularly fascinating case study.
It really is. And I mean, I'll be honest, I was skeptical seeing it the first time. I did think that it was just, a concept vehicle to be able to demonstrate and hold all of their kind of component technologies. But yeah, they've done a great job at kind of packaging it up into a product here and continue towards, market introduction eventually.
And I think you guys know I was sort of the opposite. The first minute I saw that car 2 years ago, I knew that they were going to build a car. And
You're
my
always
thinking
right,
still,
Colin, aren't you?
yeah, I hate being right all the time, but it does make sense for consumer electronics companies to get into this, right? So, the Sony brand, maybe eventually LG's, it makes sense for other people. Samsung already makes cars, but, get more into it. It does make sense.
Yeah. Definitely looking at the schedule, I think we are gonna go deep into the automaker side of CES on tomorrow's recap. So I'm curious on the supplier side, Jeremy, did anything stick out to you?
Yeah, so we had quite a few of the big suppliers. Today we'll cover a few of them in a bit more detail here over the next day or two. But we had a lot of the big ADAS and automated driving suppliers, Bosch, ZF, Conti, Forvia, Panasonic. I mean, there were quite a few here who were present, Vallejo as well. They all continued to talk about and focus on autonomy as a product area, as an area that they're working. It's an area of growth, of investment, et cetera, et cetera. But it was always at the kind of the response of a question where it's like, hey, hype around level 4 and autonomy has really taken a big hit over the past 12 months. What does this mean for your business going forward? Everyone had a really good response to it. They started by just talking about the technologies that they have. Bosch is, what is it? There's an average of like 22, Bosch MEM sensors in every car produced today. Is talking about some pretty cool, interesting things around their domain controller and the new Pro AI system that kind of underpins the high performance compute on their automated driving side. But as soon as that question was asked, everyone was very much, they weren't sensitive to it in any way. All of these companies realized, and, we're saying all along that this is a long-term proposition. We're not going to have autonomous vehicles overnight. And they all, in their kind of press conferences today, helped frame that proactively by talking about ADAS and automated driving on the one case, things that are available today, customers are willing to pay for. And then with a couple, ZF and a company, Holon, talking about the autonomous shuttles that we've seen from a couple of other manufacturers, not always successfully, but seeing this as kind of a more realistic near term deployment case for some of these level 4 technologies. So everyone definitely covered it. None of them shied away from it. We heard a good few mentions about e-mobility components and growth through these companies as well. But a common theme, and many of the minutes, I think, throughout their press conferences were all dedicated to this topic of automated driving and autonomy in different ends of the spectrum, depending on who you were talking to, but very much front and center, which isn't a surprise, but is definitely something that they had to handle carefully because it's been a pretty challenging year for development and deployment of level 4, the Argo being closed down, divested from the two automakers and a number of other companies just, yeah, facing some more challenging outlooks here as macroeconomic conditions start to tighten up. Did you guys see anything else, interesting from any of the suppliers out there today? I mean, I could run down for sure more from Bosch and ZF. They had quite full days of press conferences today. But in terms of supplier takeaways, what did you guys hear about?
Yeah, a big one
Yeah.
for me was Panasonic did a great job. Obviously, big company, so talking about many different things, different aspects of their business. But on the automotive side, two things came to mind. One, obviously, audio and infotainment. So in infotainment, they mentioned their Skip Gen. It's their latest next gen infotainment system. And they had Amazon up. Amazon partners with, it feels like every company in the world on Alexa. But this system was Alexa and CarPlay, or better to say Siri, were combined. So you could use the Siri wake word or the Alexa wake word. Amazon says they do this because from their use cases and their behavioral studies, what they've noticed is that people use Siri for specific things, people use Alexa for specific things, and so that's something that they've been working on for years. It's called the Voice Interoperability Initiative. This is just the first introduction on an automotive application. I'm not so sure about consumer. The other thing they showed was called EV audio. And this is, something we'll talk about in general is we've seen a lot of focus on lightweighting for EVs, but also sound, right? There's a lot of different dynamics when you get rid of the engine the and replace it with an e-motor, a lot of different sound dynamics, a lot more potential from road noise and things like that. So what Panasonic was focused on, though, other audio companies we'll talk about later, was on power savings here. So their new modular EV audio systems, it eliminates the speakers required in the door and focuses the speakers in the dash. They say that this will have a 67% reduction in power consumption. And their example was that could potentially add 3 to 6 miles of range to a vehicle. So obviously, sound systems, very power consumption here. So those were some of the takeaways from Panasonic.
Yeah. It's an interesting one. Both of those, Colin. The voice issue is not trivial. We've been hearing that a lot, especially at CES year over year. This issue of, it used to be, we'd be competing with the OEM's voice system and then either Siri or Google Assistant, depending on what you're bringing in. But now there's more ands instead of ors, right? You've got the OEM solution. Maybe you have built-in Android Google Assistant, and then you're also bringing in Siri if you're an iPhone person, and that car could also have Alexa on top of it. So this is something I know Cerence has talked a lot about, but I feel like it's in terms of a broad solution that has solved this problem, it still seems lacking. So interesting to see the development there.
Yeah.
Also
Interesting to
on
see.
yeah,
Sorry, it'll be interesting. They have to obviously add a Google Voice Assistant that's like more than half the market, right? So that I'm sure that's hopefully
right,
their next move.
right. Yeah, and on this point of Panasonic, this really caught my attention, and I think we also heard quite a bit of this from Bose as well. There's a few things from Bose that have sort of stuck with me. One of them is their sort of next generation of 3D audio. They're calling it 3DX. 3D in the car is really all about height. It's all about giving you sound from sort of above the traditional area of where those speakers would be, whether it's built in the into a headrest or it's built into an A pillar or something like that. And they've done some cool things, especially from a software perspective there, and bringing in another partner, Dolby Atmos, which I think is a great idea because you're this is an area where you look at a company, traditional supplier, bringing in something that's being used in the consumer electronics industry and specifically being used in the music industry. Dolby Atmos is very popular and gaining popularity. So it's easy to see, kind of expect maybe some consumer demand, or if not consumer demand, at least the appeal that a consumer might have to that functionality, that quality being brought into the vehicle. And when you're talking about audio, these high end audio systems, they are incredibly important for automakers because they're high, high spec vehicle, highest trim on that vehicle, high margin on that trim, right? So it's always important to keep kind of innovating there and staying ahead of the curve to be able to justify the prices of those trims.
Mhm.
Another one from Bose, again, kind of similar theme to the electric vehicle story, is their EVSE, their electric vehicle sound enhancement. In this, they showed in the GMC Hummer EV. So this is actually already on the Hummer. So this is a production system that they're just kind of showing off for the first time. And it fits along with the drive modes, right? So you've got in the Hummer, you've got kind of your road, your on road, you've got your terrain, you've got your off roading, um, all these different sort of customizations that maybe it changed the height of the vehicle, kind of look and feel, the color of the dashboard, and all these different things. Sound is included in that. And sometimes that sounds, let's say, more cute than functional. But I actually found, it's definitely functional use case there. That the one that really caught my attention was in terrain mode. They had a demo of, the vehicles against like a pile of rocks and it's building torque, right? You're hitting the accelerator more and more. The vehicle's not moving. It's completely silent, right? As electric vehicles are one to do. So giving that feedback to the driver that they are applying more torque, right? It's not a scenario where you just want to slam on the accelerator and see your vehicle flip over that pile of rocks, or if you're climbing something, right? In kind of this sort of off-roading type scenario. It's the first time I'd really contemplated that as someone that does take my vehicle off-road, to be honest, that audible and then, of course, that sort of haptic feedback is really the only way you're doing something. So I think it's just a good, unique example of using another, you know, it's not the groundbreaking technology, but it's using kind of another way to build the brand DNA of what that Hummer EV is. And part of it is its off-road capability, and sound helps with that.
I
And
mean,
the yeah,
putting
sorry,
together
go
like
ahead.
some of these like I don't know, kind of interesting components into like a new package is just it's what these suppliers have always been really good at. I mean, not to pull you away from Bose
Right.
here, but ZF had talked about that they called it the heat belt, right? I mean, it's a seat belt, but it's wired together with some electronics and some heating coils and wiring to heat up your seat belt the same way you could with a heated steering wheel. I mean, it's these like small like creature comforts. I mean, they're not to dismiss, how the engineering that goes into them, but those types of things really do help sell like an experience and a level of like premium quality that
Right.
I think consumers tend to resonate with.
Yeah. No, it's a really good point, Jeremy. And the last one I wanted to hit out because it's kind of saving the best for last in terms of at least my opinion, and that was this point you made, Colin, on the potential for range extension with some of this technology that Panasonic had showed, and similarly from Bose. And I think you broaden out and you're starting to connect a couple of dots here that are showing a very real problem in our industry. When we look at electric vehicles and the road noise issue and how that's being solved today is pretty eye-opening, right? It's really dumbing down a lot of the technology and a lot of the advantages that some of these vehicles have, right? It's throwing a bunch of foam onto the underside of the vehicle or inside of the tire, or replacing better performing shocks with shocks that are better at road noise, but they're not as well performing, from a vehicle performance steering perspective. There's a lot of some of these unfortunate trade-offs that have to be made because road noise is a huge issue, right? It's the perception of quality of the interior vehicle is pretty directly associated to road noise in many cases, amongst other problems, right? How long you can drive the vehicle, right? If there's a lot of road noise, that definitely deteriorates there. So hearing some of these solutions, not necessarily through the lens of buy this extra thing and it'll improve your road noise. More so, if you go the technology route for some of these road noise cancellation solutions, you can then go back and look at some of those engineering decisions you made in the past about that foam inside the tire or under the vehicle or the shocks. And, maybe you can achieve the same level of road noise with technology while removing some of that burdensome material from the vehicle, which can actually have cost savings ramifications, right? Not something we
Right.
typically talk about at CES, cost savings. That's one for sure. As well as, again, some of these performance related things. So yeah, I think this is definitely something that we're starting to see more and more solutions brought because it seems that the problem's getting more glaring with so many new EV launches that are
Yeah.
really sort of trumpeting the issue.
Yeah, exactly. And I think they gave us some figures, right? It saves maybe $100 to $200 depending on the application.
Yep, right. They
Yeah.
mentioned
And then,
kind of the average of vehicles that they had torn down, and I don't know if it's a representative sample, but, still kinda interesting to think about, of potentially saving 22 kilograms and, yeah, like you said, somewhere around, like, $150 per vehicle. Not insignificant, right? That's pretty substantial. So, again, I
and
don't
that's what
think they're
automakers need to,
yeah.
that's what they
Yep,
want to
go ahead.
hear, right? Like for a many supplier at this point, bringing EVs on the market. If we remember last year, right, Mercedes very much emphasized, now we need to move to lightweighting for EVs. We just can't keep putting bigger and bigger batteries. How are you going to charge 300 kilowatt hour battery right at your home? And
Right.
you can't be roaming around in a 17,000 pound vehicle. So we need to start focusing on reducing the weight. That's how you get the better range without putting a high density battery into the vehicle. And so I think they well position themselves in this manner.
Yeah, definitely. Alright, we're pretty much up against time. Any last minute things from today or last night that you were hoping to mention here, Colin, Jeremy?
No, I'm just looking forward to tomorrow. I'm looking forward to hearing what BMW has tonight and looking forward to talking about that tomorrow.
Yeah, nothing other, really pressing. There's a bunch of interesting stuff that we didn't get to today. We'll touch on some of these companies, over the next couple of days, but it it's tough to be able to summarize
Mm.
what the world's biggest automotive suppliers are doing because they're not standing still. They're doing quite a bit in a lot of different domains. They've got, a big portfolio of components, ZF talking about essentially having every by wire product that they would need, pushing really hard here into domain controllers and compute. They obviously have the sensor portfolio available to them. I mean, I don't know, when does ZF start making cars? So that's maybe the question we need to start thinking about here.
Yeah,
But
that's the point.
but no, I mean it was a great first day. Like I think we've all said, it's great to be back here. Maybe slightly less populated, but there's a lot of people here, and they're eager to get back to talking, to learning about the industry and connecting. I think
Yeah.
it's something that we've all missed. I certainly have here. So it's a
That's
great day one. I'm looking forward to more of it.
that's definitely a good
Yep.
point. And I think for all of us, we haven't seen the West Hall. Automotive has all been put into this beautiful new convention center. And another thing that a lot of press conferences mentioned was their booths and how they've totally restyled them. So obviously during COVID, the marketing, part of these companies spent some time and investment and thought into what their displays should look like going forward. So again, yeah, happy to look into that tomorrow too and see how it is.
All right. Thanks, guys. As I said, that is time. So, first of all, really appreciate you guys taking the time. I know it's a busy schedule out here in Vegas. Thanks for sitting down to join Autology tonight.
Happy to be
No
here. Looking
problem.
forward to some more.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah. And thanks to all you listeners for tuning in as well. We would love to hear your thoughts on today's episode at our Autology at spglobal.com, excuse me, email. And you can find out much more at autotechinsight.ihsmarket.com. Don't forget to hit all the subscribe, follow, and like buttons to stay on track with the latest Autology podcasts. And we look forward to you joining us for the next episode. As I mentioned, we will be back tomorrow and we'll discuss more news from the automaker perspective with the likes of BMW still to discuss today. And then Ram and Chrysler also using CES as a platform to make some major announcements. Bye for now.